Hello and welcome to the Untitled Anarchist Seagull channel. I'm your host, an Untitled Anarchist Seagull called Elise. Hi Adam, hi Genkeros, ¿cómo están? And we are going to continue with the Last JabroniCon. Let's see what we've got. We've got a bunch of shit. Let's see. Cop who... Okay. We've got Pim Tool, cop who did nothing in George Floyd incident, gets 5 years in prison. Democrats are evil. Trump faces 561 years in prison, slams Biden administration as Marxists. The Young Turfs has fallen. This is because they're not because of how reactionary they are, but because they're feuding with Ian Kaczynski. Oh, what have you seen? I think we're gonna start out with... We're gonna find out, what interesting, Marxist tendency the Biden administration is. Wait. He called for an invasion of Niger? Fucking hell.
All right, here's the first story for...
Okay, that's a bit loud.
Mediaite, 561 years in prison. Trump fundraising off of recent indictment with dire warning.
Oh, okay, Henkiros? Can you find me the link to that video? Because that sounds like one that we might want to look at over here.
You could be thrown in jail for 6 lifetimes. So I actually got this email, and it says, Patriot.
Which, I mean, just a normal way to start a letter.
Crooked Joe's corrupt DOJ having unlawfully indicted yours truly yet again. Reports indicate that I could now face a combined 561 years in prison from the left's witch hunts.
Wait, okay, so you've got Joe Biden and the left are coming after him? Wow, that's gotta suck. I didn't even know that the left could initiate prosecutions in the U.S. If so, why the hell is George Bush not inside? There's only one message someone can send by trying to throw you in jail for 6 lifetimes, and that's fear. Wow, I mean, isn't that interesting? Well, maybe this applies to things other than the first U.S. president ever to be held legally accountable for even his most trivial crimes. Oh, fucking hell, Nightbot. Fun fact, in Chile, pendejo just means kid. Excellent. Okay, I've got that on the list. Thank you for that, King Kiddos.
6 lifetimes. There's only one message someone can send by trying to throw you in jail for 6 lifetimes, and that's fear. The fear that if you vote for the only candidate who puts you first, you too could be harassed, indicted, and even arrested by the current Marxist regime in Washington.
Wow, okay, comrades, did you realize we were in a Marxist regime? Like, what tendency is this?
Alright, well, so we know about these indictments, but the latest update here, aside from the fact that Trump could be facing 561 years, Alan Dershowitz says conviction of Trump would be overturned by the Supreme Court.
Now, let's leave aside, of course, I mean, Alan Dershowitz is a piece of shit, and one of the wonderful things, I have to say, about him and Giuliani hitching their wagons to Trump's star has been that their reputations have been brought down into the realistic range. And I love that. I am there for that. But, I mean, the thing is, he's not wrong. Oh, this is from the Post-Millennial. This is from, that guy who creates kill lists for Atomwaffen.
On Tuesday, Biden's DOJ filed yet another indictment, this we know, following the announcement. Lawyer and Harvard professor Alan Dershowitz sat down with Fox News' Sean Hannity to discuss the former president's legal prospects, suggesting...
Is he still a lawyer? Wait a second, didn't he get... I thought he got suspended or something. No, let me see. He was disciplined, but he was not actually suspended. Well, apparently a Marxist regime is where a guy who spends his entire career sucking up to white supremacists and major corporations and basically spends all of his time exclusively screwing over the working class, becomes president and continues doing that. I would love to hear Tim Pool try to define Marxism.
Saying that while he would likely be convicted, the ruling would be overturned by the Supreme Court.
Which is actually not at all impossible.
Quote, they claim that Donald Trump actually believed that he lost the election, that everything he did was fraudulent, that he conspired with unnamed lawyers to affect the election.
Yeah, exactly. And the thing is that if it comes down to whether he actually believed it, that's a fact issue. And fucking Alan Dershowitz, of all people, ought to know that fact issues don't go anywhere on appeal for the most part.
You're allowed to challenge elections. Indeed, the best way to challenge elections is to come up with a slate of alternate electors.
No, that's not how you challenge elections, though. You go to court, there's a whole procedure. Hey, Adrien.
The government has the burden of proof beyond a reasonable doubt that subjectively Donald Trump actually believed that he lost the election and acted contrary to that belief.
Well, he didn't act contrary to that belief. He acted in accordance with that belief. The idea is that in accordance, but since he believed he lost the election, the only way that he could actually come back and return to the White House is by extra-legal means.
There is no smoking gun. There is no one who is credibly prepared to testify that Donald Trump said to him, I know personally I lost the election.
This is such nonsense, though. That isn't, you don't need to actually, yeah, that would be, that would be really handy if somebody did see that, but you could actually just impute to him the fact that he was aware of it. Because, he watched the fucking results come in like everybody else. Well, that's because pragmatic is defined as just anything right-wing. Yeah, Tim Pool is one of the Occupy grifters. He's one of the OG Occupy grifters. That's what OG stands for in this case, Occupy grifter. Like Caleb Maupin and Micah White, and yeah, it's really just fascinating how some of the best and worst things going on in like non-electoral politics in the US all come from Occupy in some way or another.
What they're doing with the indictment is they're taking things where Trump said, like, you're crazy to someone, as if to imply that means he really knew that he did lose the election.
Well, wouldn't that depend on what he was responding to? I somehow don't think that the indictment is saying that he just walked up to random people and said, hey, you're crazy. Although, being Donald Trump, I could entirely see him just randomly doing that.
And more importantly, I'm not so sure how much any of this procedural stuff matters. What the Democrats have been doing is effectively just an onslaught of whatever they can keep firing off at Donald Trump. And
well, no, that's not even true. If they wanted to have an onslaught, there are so many charges they could bring that would be easier to actually win on the facts, precisely because Trump has openly admitted them. But they won't touch him. They're more serious charges than any of the stuff he's charged with. But if they charged Trump with committing crimes against humanity for his treatment of refugees, or, his encouragement of police violence against political opponents, and any of that stuff, that would set a precedent where they could get prosecuted for that shit too, and they're not gonna fucking do that.
And it's probably gonna be some kind of death by 1,000 cuts.
Buena.
Yeah, it's impossible not to factor in the timing here, right? Like, you've had these investigations going, since the day he was elected? Like, he has been so intensely...
I don't think the investigation into him trying to overturn the election in 2020 was going on since the day that he was elected. I think they waited a few years for that, for him to actually try to do that.
Investigated for the last effectively 8 years. And now, all of a sudden, on the eve of an election, they are ready to prosecute. They have all of these ideas. And
Well, which is kind of... Isn't that weird, though? How they spend a long time investigating and building a case, and then they decided to prosecute, and how the feds take a long time with that? Like, I mean, that's how it fucking works.
in fact, they aren't just going to try it in one court, they're going to try it 3 different times. I mean, it's sort of bizarre.
Yeah, they're going after him on easily the most trivial things that he did wrong. There are so many things. Like, I mean, because as Noam Chomsky has correctly observed, every U.S. president since 1945 has committed capital offenses under international law and under the Nuremberg principles.
Mike Pence said yesterday, I'm going to wait to review everything, but this is just a distraction from the real issues.
He threw Trump under the bus.
He threw him under the bus.
Everybody who realized that it was a good career move did that at the exact last moment, and then the Democrats were like, hey, look at these fucking heroes. These are the good Republicans. We're going to work with them to screw over the working class now.
And he's not even, at last I checked, he didn't even qualify for the debates, right? Like, I think this shows you how intensely influential the Trump campaign is, that they are timing federal investigations to try and throw off his campaign. I mean, this is one of the things that comes up. When are they going to have these trials, right? Will it keep him from...
Well, yeah, it's almost as if the idea is that a guy who already tried to overturn the election result when he lost once, they aren't keen on having him get in again, and since they know the guy they're going to run against him is fucking Joe Biden, so he has a great chance of winning just by default, because a fucking reject couch could actually instead make a better result against Trump than Joe Biden, because nobody fucking likes him. The only thing they've got is this. I mean, they could just run somebody popular against him, and then that would probably do it. Because the thing is, what's ridiculous about this is the idea that if, you do this, the fascists will quiet down. Like, seriously? You think the fascists are going to, crawl back in their holes and not shut the fuck up if Trump actually gets convicted? They're gonna kick off.
Campaigning and being with people, and instead it'll be in the headlines where, they're gonna restrict media access to the court, there are gonna be all these issues just to try to slow him down, and nothing is working.
Yeah, it's like the same old tired trope. They tried this with Russia, when you kind of bog him down over and over again, and now they're continuing. I don't know at what point will they pull a different play of their playbook. I'm a little concerned. He is straddling.
Kenneth 32? Who the hell is Kenneth 32? Oh, he's connected to the Oklahoma City bombing. Isn't that interesting? That's the kind of guys he has on.
The line, like, kind of JFK-ish, like, at what point does he hop over the line to where the deep state does something? I don't know, and what are they going to do? I don't know.
It's always a possibility for any president for a variety of reasons, but I don't think that's the route they go. I think what's more likely to happen...
What is a possibility for any president? He hasn't actually said what.
Well, for one, they tried the rape thing in New York.
Well, no, I mean, Trump admitted to sexual assault, and his ex-wife accused him of sexual assault in their divorce filings, and, yeah, I mean, and that probably would have mattered if the people who vote for him gave a shit about that, and the same goes for Joe Biden.
Where they're like, he's been convicted or not convicted, he's been found liable or something for some 30-year-old nonsense story. I just want to stress how ridiculous and insane the story was. And if you believe it...
What story?
If you claim to believe it, you're either lying or really dumb.
In which case he'd want to have you on his show.
That Trump went into what was the department store? Like this...
Bergdorf Goodman, right?
Yeah, this massive department store. And for some reason, nobody was anywhere. They walked in and everyone just vanished. They must have been raptured because they were gone. And then they went into a dressing room where, for some reason, the doors were unlocked.
Because that's how dressing rooms are. I've never been to a dressing room with locking doors. They usually just have a fucking... They usually just have a fucking curtain or something like that. No, this is Tim Pool, but he's kind of the same person. If you take his hat off and adjust his facial hair, then you've got fucking Joe Rogan. And if you just dress him up a little bit more smartly and adjust his facial hair again and take the beanie off, then he's Ben Shapiro. It's one fucking fash action figure with 3 different outfits.
And then they went inside, did the deed, and left, and no one noticed. No one noticed. No one noticed the king of New York, the most famous guy in the city. Nobody noticed him walk into this massive shopping center. It's an insane story. But they've tried that. I bring that up because...
Well, first of all, maybe they did notice. Second of all, who cares?
This is what they did to Julian Assange. They made this ridiculous fake story about... First, it was like a condom broke, and then molestation. Then the media reports it as rape, which is all a lie.
Well, no, I mean, the situation there is that under Swedish law, it constitutes sexual assault because he did not, because if consent can be revoked, and if consent is obtained by deception, by saying you're going to wear a condom and then you don't, or something like that, then under Swedish law and under the law of a lot of places, and actually just fucking common sense, that constitutes sexual assault. Now, what is true is that the fucking Swedish authorities never gave a shit about any of this. They never made the slightest effort to do just the bare minimum to prosecute this stuff. And thanks to an Italian journalist who kept on filing Freedom of Information requests, it turned out the whole time the British authorities were the ones sort of pressuring them to keep the case alive, just like on life support, at the same time as not doing anything about it, just so that so that Britain would have an excuse to keep him locked up so he could be extradited to the U.S. The connection most people would point to is that, he released the the Clinton email leaks during the campaign, and a lot of liberals are convinced that the universally unpopular Hillary Clinton was irreparably harmed by this, and then went on to win by 3 million votes, which only in the U.S. qualifies as losing. Oh, yeah, good point. The exonerated 5, they now prefer to call themselves, understandably, since, they had Central Park 5 thrown at them for so fucking long. Yeah.
Then, they throw it all out and say, yeah, that's nonsense. We don't care about that anymore. Now they're going after him for espionage, which is also nonsense. But Hillary Clinton...
it is nonsense. The espionage charge literally would apply to pretty much any journalist.
Was famously quoted as saying, can't we just drone this guy? And then they were like, yeah, he's in love.
A lot of people were quoted as saying that. There was a while there after Cablegate where, openly calling for his murder was just a thing that would go on in the fucking mainstream media, just casually saying, yeah, maybe this guy should be taken out, maybe we should whack this guy, or something like that. But how they're connected... Yeah, how they're connected in Tim Pool's mind is they're both fash. A lot of people don't remember there is or maybe was a WikiLeaks party associated with Assange in Australia, and Assange, who was in control of the party, had the WikiLeaks party give all their preferences to the explicitly neo-Nazi Australia First party. And that's why somebody like Pim Tool likes him.
London, so no, we can't. But this is typically what they try to do to people outside of Western nations. Inside, they've changed strategies. They don't want to make a martyr of these people, so what do? They accuse Julian Assange of being a rapist so that it sounds really, really awful historically and in the press.
Because accusing somebody of being a rapist totally means that their career is over, which is why Joe Biden's not U.S. president right now, and why Donald Trump has never been heard from ever since his first ex-wife accused him of rape in the divorce filings. Yeah, clearly, if you want to end somebody's career, you just have to accuse them credibly of sexually assaulting, though. Yeah.
Try that with Trump, but it seems to just bounce off because nobody cares.
Yeah, isn't that interesting how the people who support Trump don't give a shit that he's a fucking rapist?
And nobody believes it anymore.
People
And
have already picked their sides, right? Like you're not going to convince anybody that hates him that much that he's a good guy, and you're not going to convince the most entrenched of his fans that he's suddenly a bad guy.
Well, aside from that, they would not consider that being a bad guy because so many of his fans actually kind of think that makes him cooler.
Even many of his fans don't see him as that good of a guy. It's more
They
so
have
that
more of a realistic view.
he's a sword. He's or what did Michael?
He's a sword?
Michael Moore say a human Molotov cocktail. So when they come out and they throw all this garbage at Trump to stick to him, and they're like, "See, look how bad he is," they're like, "Oh, you're sweetening the pot."
And I think it's hard.
Well, yeah, because the thing is, it is the worst people in the world, demonstrably the absolute worst people in the world who support him. So, pointing out how much Trump sucks does not make him less attractive to shitty people like Tim Pool and Mike Cernovich and fucking Ben Shapiro. It's never gonna make a fucking dent. They don't give a shit.
Hard.
And this is the thing that liberals do not get about fascism. I'm not saying I don't take a position whether Trump personally is a fascist. I think it doesn't matter. He is so closely associated with so many people who definitely are fascists. And he has so regularly given shout-outs to groups that are fascists that I don't give a shit what his personal ideological beliefs are. I think he's fundamentally opportunistic as fuck, which also does not rule out fascism, because it's a very opportunistic ideology. But the thing is that basically everything that makes a fascist look bad in the eyes of liberals makes him look really fucking cool and based and pog to the people, to the fascist target audience. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah, a bunch of fucking misogynists and white nationalists who just want to feel the power, who just want to be able to kick downward, and feel good about it, because it's the only thing that makes them feel good about themselves, hear that he's just a scumbag, and it's like, wow, fucking aspirational.
To contrast Trump, who hypothetically did something after we demanded he turned over all of these documents, he's been under federal scrutiny for years, with the actual reality of the Biden administration, right? Like, when you...
The actual reality of the Biden administration? Like, as opposed to the fantasy we all had about the Biden administration.
are comparing two things, the effects of inflation on your family and a hypothetical goose chase, which actually is the federal government wasting taxpayer funds.
A hypothetical goose chase. I've never heard of that. That's like a really tame goose chase. That's not a wild goose chase at all. That's just, it's a hypothetical goose chase.
I feel like I'm going to be more mad at the federal government overall. It's not helping whatever cause they think they have.
Which, I mean, there's probably some truth to that, because the thing is, out of all of the things, this is like when liberals got obsessed over Trump's tax returns, to the extent that when neo-Nazis showed up in Berkeley to, bust heads and do the usual shit, liberals at one point were also having a release the tax returns demonstration and, not doing anything about the fascists who are right there in the same fucking town on the same fucking day. As if anyone gives a shit about his tax returns. Of course they're gonna show that he's fucking bent. Of course they're gonna show he doesn't pay any taxes. He's a billionaire. They don't pay taxes. What is it? What surprises were they expecting to find in them? Meanwhile, I mean, look at all of the things that affect our lives. There are things that affect our lives more in that exact same fucking Fulton County, Georgia courthouse right now than the fucking Trump indictment. Like, I mean, Stop Cop City, which you never hear. In fact, I mean, if you were there, if you were watching the footage of when they were when the grand jury came back, you would see protesters in the background, and you couldn't really get a good look at him in the footage that I saw, but that was Stop Cop City. Because they were sick of getting totally ignored in by the national and international press, who are right there in fucking Atlanta, and could be talking to them about the really just close to nigh on unprecedented repression that they're facing right now, with all the bogus charges that they're facing. I mean, like criminalizing bail funds and accusing people of terrorism for having a legal aid number written down on their hands and shit. And that affects us way more than any of this. That affects us so much more, because if that stuff is allowed to stand, if those bullshit charges and all of the just state terror that has been directed against the Stop Cop City people is allowed to stand, it's coming to a place near us. I mean, that's just guaranteed. That affects us way more than that. Or like the fucking trans exterminationist wave that's going on unabated in this country. Like, that affects, like, there's so many news stories that have more of a direct effect on the lives of millions of people than this.
The question is, are they indicting Trump?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, he legally does not pay taxes because the laws are written in the interests of rich fucks like him.
To interfere in the election, to distract from the Joe Biden corruption allegations, or could it be that the U.S.
Nobody gives a shit about the Joe Biden corruption allegations either. I mean, and you can look at polls on this. People assume that Washington is just drowning in dodgy cash. People assume that the motherfuckers are just up there and, feathering their own nests. And they assume that because there's a lot of evidence that that's exactly what goes on, and because this country makes it basically legal to bribe people, as long as you are very careful not to just outright say it's a quid pro quo. I mean, so nobody gives a shit. Corruption, I mean, it's like, people are, I think, immune to the possible, allegations of high-level corruption in this country because everybody just assumes that's going on anyway.
Credit rating was just downgraded from AAA to AA+, and we've had I think the highest number of bankruptcies in the first 2 quarters this year since the past 13 years. So something is going wrong economically. Inflation is through the roof. I mean, just go to...
It's almost like the rich fucks that you simp for, Tim. Maybe they're really cleaning up right now.
The grocery store, buy groceries, and it's nuts. So there was a viral TikTok where it was like this couple, and they were like, it said buying groceries in 2011, and they're like dancing, and they have this big...
It's so weird when guys like this, who think that rich pricks should be allowed to do whatever they want with no accountability, start to try to pretend that they're angry about stuff that rich pricks do when they're allowed to do whatever they want with no accountability. I mean, it's like, what did you think was going to happen? This is why are you mad? This is what you want.
And it's like $100, and then it was like buying groceries today, and they're standing there, and there's like 5 things, and it's the same price. So yeah, when working class
5 things, it's the same price,
and the middle Americans are right now watching the news, and someone on CNN comes out and says Donald Trump had classified documents, they're like, I'm just trying to buy some beef for my family, dude. Like, I don't know what you're talking about.
I don't think that you can actually effectively talk... I mean, I know that I talk back to Tim Pool on the internet right now, but I don't actually think there's a conversation happening there. But yeah, I mean, I can't actually fault what he's saying here. I do get the impression most people probably don't give a shit about this. Yeah, exactly. Well, he doesn't... I don't think he ever really talks about the working class. I mean, not explicitly, but he does love to talk. I mean, like, all his conspiracy theories about, like, rich people who almost always turn out to be Jewish, trying to fuck up the world, and, like, and here he is, like, defending a system that allows rich people to just do whatever they want and fuck up the world. Yeah, he lives in this fucking compound in this fucking like Neverland Ranch for Wojaks
Yeah.
that he
Meanwhile,
has.
561 years. It's giving very Alex
Giving
Jones.
desperate.
It's giving Alex Jones. With,
Well, 561, where they get that is you combine all of the maximum sentences. The likelihood of somebody on a first conviction getting all of the maximums and then having them also served concurrently. This is assuming that he gets convicted for everything. Under the federal sentencing guidelines, that is extremely unlikely. The reason that he's doing this is the reason that he's like throwing out that 561 years is because it makes it sound really, really fucking bad. Like that's the sort of thing that like a black guy who gets caught for weed should be doing, not a rich rapist white supremacist asshole who tried to overturn the closest thing to a democratic election that we're allowed to have in the United States.
what does he owe now? Like $2 billion or like?
No, wasn't it trillion?
It's like
Yeah, that's quite right, Kidastro. He loves to pretend he's a centrist. His whole thing, and he likes to pretend he's like this disillusioned liberal. Like he's not a Republican, man. He's not a Republican. He just like spends hours and hours and hours on the internet standing them.
$1 trillion.
Entire life.
Like he's just
It
going
was
to
the
be.
it was the GDP of France, wasn't it?
Yeah. He owns
No, I'm not
an
kidding.
entire European nation.
Like it's like they just throw the book at them because they hate them. They understand that the people that already hate them are going to continue to hate them. They're like, oh, good, even though they.
Well, are there reasons that people don't like them? I mean, and I love how they act like that's some sort of niche thing. Like, I mean, Trump is actually is extremely unpopular. Most people don't like him. Most people didn't like him when he was president, and he has not aged well.
They understand that he's just going to file bankruptcy, and whatever's going to happen is
And
going to
like
happen.
my thing is like all of this seems like a politically charged goose chase when there are like
She gets so close to using the expression correctly. First, it's a hypothetical goose chase. You know, a goose chase that may or may not happen. And now it's a politically charged goose chase. Like, just in case that goose goes across the road, but I mean, the question is the goose a communist or something?
actual child predators or murderers out there who get less
Yeah,
time.
yeah.
or
Well, it was
hypothetically for Trump.
2.75.
Well, wait a second. Like, if you get 561 years, they don't keep you alive for 561 years. Like, even assuming... Like, I mean, this is like, if you... Okay. When Ed Snowden's disclosures came out, and it turned out that the NSA had been carrying out millions of cases of illegal wiretapping. Now, under Title 50 of the U.S. Code, which includes the criminal provisions for abusing wiretapping, each case has a maximum of 5 years. Now, of course, hypothetically, you could sentence someone if if they had 1 million cases of illegal wiretapping, 1 million counts, they could hypothetically get 1 million years if they were actually charged with it. 5 million years, sorry. That's not going to happen. It's just going to be life. Yeah, exactly. Actual child predator. Yeah, I mean, I don't know that this is the angle that they should be going down, because they're just reminding everybody of Donald Trump's greatest fucking hits.
Trillion!
That seems reasonable.
Brilliant. That's the GDP of France.
I like the idea that,
Alex
like-
Jones must pay us the GDP of France.
He's like, yep, I'm on it.
It would be funny if like everybody in France loved Alex Jones to the point where they were
Except that they don't.
buying from him, and he did make that much money, and we just didn't know about it.
And they just
gosh, he
ask
has
for
a
his
secret-
Venmo. They're like, can you Venmo us the money?
We've got you,
Yeah.
don't worry.
But also, like, I mean,
Today and other things that are unlikely to ever happen.
there's J6 people, like, they're going to rush this trial to make sure that it happens, like, right before the election. Meanwhile, J6 people, no trial, no nothing. It's
Well, I mean, they're being tried. Most of them aren't even getting charged. The ones who are getting charged, they are getting tried. Although, for the most part, I mean, the federal system lives on fucking plea deals. So, yeah, a lot of them probably are pleading out.
It's very, like, if you pay close enough attention to what's going on in the world, you understand just how unfair all of it is, but the average person isn't paying that.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a bunch of neo-Nazis who tried to do a Laurel and Hardy version of the U.S. coup in Bolivia. I mean, it would be so unfair if they had to, like, actually face criminal sanctions for that, like people do for breaking the window of a CVS during an uprising against state terror.
Close attention.
That's what I found weird about Pence's comments, because he released this statement like right after the indictment came out, being like, it means more talk about January 6th and other distractions, and you want to be like, we should talk about January 6th. We should talk about January 6th all the time.
Why do you want to talk about January 6th, though? Well, I mean, actually, I have a pretty good idea, because they actually, you know, they'll call it a distraction or whatever, but the thing is, they want more of that. I mean, Tim Pool has been Tim Pool's show has a literal fucking body count. He goes out of his way to incite violence a lot of the time. And he would love to see fucking Fash going around doing shit like that, possibly doing it a little bit less incompetently than they did it on January 6th.
Why? Because there are people who were persecuted in a way that no one else has been.
What? They went into... we think that's unprecedented? That people who... Like, what? I don't even understand. What does she think actually is going on that is unprecedented? Like, they tried to forcibly overturn an election and invaded the Capitol in a fucking armed mob of white nationalists in order to do that. I mean, it's not unprecedented for people to face criminal charges for that.
And we just let them fall to, like, you shouldn't let them just fall to the wayside. Like, that's the best thing about the Trump situation, in my opinion, which is that we, like, continue to talk about the miscarriage of justice at the federal level.
Wasn't it like literally the day before January 6th, Mike Pence said, we're going to have Congress go through this and we're going to hear the evidence. And the next day he's like, yeah, nah, I'm not going to do that. I'm willing to bet that, like, that night he's in bed with his wife and there's like a
I do not want to think about Mike Pence in bed with his wife. Thank you. I don't even think Mike Pence's wife wants to think about that.
knock on the door and he's like, whoa, what's going on? He wakes up at 2 a.m. and then he comes to the door and there's a guy in a suit with like black sunglasses. And then the guy, and Mike's like, what's going on? And then he just hands him a picture of JFK. And then Mike's like,
yeah, it's a picture of fucking JFK. You know, or maybe he realized what he wanted to continue to have a career, and that this was a good moment to get off of a sinking ship, like so many other fucking Republicans who had backed Trump to the hilt up until that very moment did.
okay.
I really just feel like it was just politically expedient from that time. I don't think anyone needed to say anything. He knew that his role as the vice president at the time was to kind of tacitly be in this in-between spot. It was very clear, too, and that's why...
Well, he also knew that his role as vice president was basically coming to an end.
There was so much rage from the Trump base against Pence is because they kind of knew he was talking out of both sides of his mouth, and he didn't really mean all this. Like him...
I mean, that much is true. He was talking out of both sides of his mouth. I mean, all of these Republicans who Democrats like try to tell us are some kind of heroes, that that never Trump Republicans or whatever. I mean, like Lynn Cheney and these fucking people. They backed every single thing. They backed every single thing that Trump did right until that moment, when it was clear that there was absolutely nothing for them to gain from continuing to do it. Like, I mean, it was opportunistic as fuck.
Saying that, oh, we'll look into this. What does that even mean? We'll look into it? Okay, cool.
His co-hosts often, I mean, the thing about being more knowledgeable and more coherent than Tim Pool is that, like, my dog is those things. Like, I've actually, there was a slug on some of my chili plants. And I'm pretty sure it is also more knowledgeable and more coherent than Tim Pool. Tim Pool's whole shtick is that he's the guy who doesn't know anything.
Like, that doesn't mean much of anything.
This is a big component too of the suit now, because it's being reported the what's the guy's name? Smith. What's his name?
Jake Smith?
Is
it Jack Smith?
Jack
The
Smith,
special counsel?
the special prosecutor, or whatever. That he
Jack Smith is not a name for a special prosecutor. Jack Smith is a name for a generic prosecutor.
claimed that Pence did not have the authority to reject electoral votes.
Which he doesn't. I mean, that isn't a claim. There literally nobody until that day had actually, even come up with the idea that the vice president could just reject electoral votes. It was an unprecedented notion. So he isn't claiming that. I mean, it's fucking settled law.
Which is wrong. He absolutely did until 2022. Apparently, there was some revision to the law. But Democrats famously brought together an alternate slate of electors from Hawaii in 1960. Despite the fact that the state was won by the Republicans, the governor certified the Republican electors, Democrats still convened a fraudulent...
Okay, I've never heard of this. 1960 Hawaii electors. Okay. Here, let me just see. I've never heard this before and I'm curious. So, yeah. The first presidential election in which Hawaii participated, the state had been admitted to the Union just over a year earlier. The island's favorite Senator John F. Kennedy by a narrow margin of 115 votes. Okay, that's the first thing. That is a hell of a lot closer than than any election Trump's been in. Okay, so what happened? Early unofficial totals suggested that Kennedy won the state by 92 votes. However, errors in the official tabulation sheets. I'm going to drop this link in chat. You can see what I'm talking about here. Yeah. Hello, Hiroko. Sorry. Okay. So, Democrats highlighted various apparent errors in the tabulation, including 34 precincts where the total number of votes cast in the precinct was smaller than the sum of Nixon's and Kennedy's vote totals, and other precincts where the number of total votes cast was much larger than the combined votes for Nixon and Kennedy. Okay. So, so they didn't just have an alternate slate of electors. Shock, horror. On November 22nd... That's an interesting date for something to do with John F. Kennedy. Attorney Robert G. Dodge filed a recount petition on behalf of 30 members of the Democratic Party of Hawaii in a Honolulu Circuit Court. Dodge did not allege any voter fraud, instead merely observing that the tabulation sheets were not consistent in various precincts. State Republican Party officials also considered supporting the recount petition, but were internally divided and eventually declined to do it. One elector in the Republican state opposed the recount petition. All three electors on the Republican slate were named as defendants, along with Republican Lieutenant Governor James Kealoha, who at the time was serving as acting governor of the state and would be required to sign any certificate of ascertainment. Okay. Attorney General Shiro Kashiwa also joined the suit to represent the state's interests. Despite the apparent tabulation... Okay. So, they didn't... Okay, see, here's the difference, Tim, between what happened with Hawaii and what happened in 2020. See, they went to court, and they actually had a case. They actually had a fucking case because there actually were, dodgy tabulations and an extremely close result, 115 votes. So the governor ordered a complete statewide recount, which concluded on December 28th and showed a Kennedy victory by 115 votes. Based on this recount, Jameson, the governor... wait, is that the governor? No, circuit court judge, sorry. Right, the governor was that other guy. The circuit court judge ordered the Democratic slate of Wilson, Heen, and Metzger be named the validly appointed presidential electors for the state of Hawaii. So that's the thing. See, this is what's called winning in court. And yes, if you win in state court and convince a judge that there's something questionable about the electoral count in your state, that an alternative slate of electors can be set. Like that, but the thing is that Trump lost in court over and over again. His lawyers kept on quitting because the case that was just such a complete joke. A lot of them ended up being sanctioned over what a bullshit case they were bringing. So literally, I mean, it wasn't just, and crucially, the vice president had no involvement in this. It was a circuit court judge in the state of Hawaii, having heard a case involving very questionable tabulation in a very close election, much closer than anything that was going on in 2016 or in 2020.
Slate of electors. I say fraudulent, good sir. And because
why would you say fraudulent? I mean, because it was 115 votes and there were...
they claim about Trump. And then sent them out, and Nixon chose to ignore, as vice president, he ignored the certified electoral votes and said, I'm gonna count the Democrat uncertified votes anyway.
They were certified, though. That was what happened, because there was a court order from the state court. And until Bush versus Gore, nobody actually... it was just generally accepted that the state courts could intervene in the state electoral process when there was some kind of irregularity under state law. So he wasn't just arbitrarily deciding to ignore the certified electors. He was complying with a court order.
Well, hold on. How does the vice president have the authority to do that back in 1960?
He didn't. He literally didn't.
And then lose it. Well, I suppose Congress could change things, but that's not what happened.
Yeah, that isn't what happened. Like, literally none of what you just said is what happened, Tim.
Mike Pence did have this authority.
No, he didn't, because there was no fucking court order from any state saying that their electors, or that there was a problem with the electoral count certified in that state and certifying an alternate slate of electors. It's literally not anywhere near the same thing, Tim.
Trump's lawyers were advising him, not perfectly, but he had some sound policy.
Not perfectly. I mean, a lot of them ended up getting sanctioned. In fact, I mean, and just ended up making asses of themselves in court. Like, literally none of them had actually tried an election-related case, because nobody who actually specialized in election law wanted to go anywhere near this bullshit. That's how he ended up with Giuliani, a criminal lawyer, and Alan Dershowitz, a criminal lawyer, neither of whom has ever done anything with election law, handling these petitions and losing badly.
And procedure advice. And then Mike Pence was just like, screw it.
Yeah.
I'm out.
It seems crazy to me. Also, like I said before, I don't think last I checked, he had not qualified for...
Okay, the way her hair is hanging and the fact that she's wearing a vest makes it look like she actually isn't wearing any clothes.
For the debates, which debates are questionable.
Her hair's totally covering up what she's wearing.
The strangest thing about this is he has to walk this weird line that's like...
that's like you actually just have to do what you have the authority to do and not exceed that. I mean, the thing is, it's true. I mean, the vice president does have some major powers in presidential elections. Like it was Mike Pence himself who elected Juan Guaido president of Venezuela, despite the fact that nobody in Venezuela had even heard of the man. It was Mike Pence, but that's Venezuelan presidential elections. He doesn't get to do that in the U.S.
Well, I was part of the Trump administration, and that's literally why all of you know who I am. Yeah. Except also, I don't...
Well, I mean, everybody in Indiana knows him from all the resign Pence yard signs that were all over Indianapolis when he was governor. They also kind of know him because he kind of single-handedly created an AIDS epidemic in the state.
I really want to be affiliated with the bad stuff or the more controversial stuff, so I'm going to sort of be the most politician of all times and try to make everyone happy, in which I will fail.
The crazy thing is that Mike Pence threw Trump under the bus, tweeting that basically saying this man should not be allowed to be president or whatever.
What's surprising about this, Tim?
It's the inversion of Vivek Ramaswamy. When Vivek came out and said we should all come together and reject these political indictments and these charges.
Who gives a shit? The guy is just, the guy is just a fucking investor. That's his entire thing. He's an investor, and the reason Tim Pool loves him is that he wrote a conspiracy theory about where wokeness comes from.
They're trying to remove Trump, in an unjust way. That's really amazing. So when you say that Mike Pence doesn't qualify for the debates, it's not a very difficult question as to why.
Well, it's because he hasn't gotten enough donors. That's like literally what I'm referring to.
Yeah, nobody wants to give money to a guy who sucks.
Yeah.
Well, yes, he does suck. we can on this we can agree. Every single one of the people that you've been talking about sucks.
But that's so interesting, right? Because theoretically, at one point, he thought he was the heir apparent. Like, if Trump got 2 terms.
Wait, Juan Guaidó had something to do with the 2001 anthrax attacks? Bueno, lo que pasa es que Hillary Clinton también hizo exactamente, la versión electrónica de lo que hizo Trump. Y resulta que lo que estaba haciendo fue, meter todo ese documento clasificado, secreto, en un servidor particular para evitar la aplicación de la ley de transparencia. Y por muy hueona, porque plata tenía para poder, asegurar bien los servidores que tenía. Pero por hueona no lo hizo y por eso quedaron filtrados todos los documentos secretos que tenía. O sea, sí, Trump lo que ha hecho es la versión low-tech de la wea que hizo Hillary Clinton. De la misma wea también que hizo Joe Biden también. Y yo no estoy ni ahí con el secreto oficial de Estados Unidos. A mi juicio, lo único malo que ha hecho respecto de esos documentos fue no publicarlos en internet, pues, weón. A mí me da completamente igual que se viole, que se incumpla la obligación de mantener el secreto oficial de unos documentos que tienen que ver con, en muchos casos, con crímenes de lesa humanidad cometidos por el gobierno estadounidense o planificado por ese mismo gobierno. ¿A mí qué? No estoy ni ahí, weón. Públicalo, po.
He would be the next obvious candidate to win. And, like, he made such a catastrophic miscalculation and then continued to be like, I think I can do it. I think I could win.
I think the landscape has changed so much. I said a minute ago that what Mike Pence was doing was politically expedient.
Yeah, well, it was politically expedient. I mean, now, why was it politically expedient? Explain to us, why was it politically expedient? Dude who is, basically trying to lionize somebody connected with the Oklahoma City bombing?
That was kind of wrong. It was traditionally...
Oh, Mike Pence. Wait, I didn't know that.
Politically expedient,
right?
And they're still in that mindset. What is now becoming the type of rhetoric that
no, I wasn't saying nobody had heard of Mike Pence. I was saying nobody in Venezuela had heard of Juan Guaidó. Like, there was polling from immediately before he declared himself president after getting Mike Pence's blessing, saying 80% of respondents had never heard of the man. He had no name recognition even.
Actually politically expedient is things like what Vivek is saying, like actually owning it and having bold messaging and having a legit message. I mean,
Well, he did that. He did that, and it was politically expedient. It probably salvaged his career, and it allowed him to posture as, like, this guy who is making a brave stand for the rule of law, which he totally isn't. He just did... Yeah, he just jumped off a fucking sinking ship.
A little bit concerned about some of his messaging and from the past, but I don't know. I'm open to see maybe just change his mind. But, I mean, either way, that is the rhetoric people want.
Thanks for watching this clip.
Yeah, you're not welcome. Okay. Now, thanks to chat.
All right, here's the first story from
Yeah,
the...
no, fuck off. Ugh. Okay. We're gonna be checking out that, Ian Kuczynski doubles down on all of the horrible shit that he's been saying. War is inevitable in Niger. Okay. I mean, yeah, let's hear a guy who doesn't even know anything about politics closer to home talk about a country he only just discovered exists. The VOP shit.
ECOWAS military leaders are potentially making a plan for the possible invasion of Niger, which is interesting.
That's one way to put it. I mean, you could say it's horrible bloodshed in the service of French uranium interests, and probably a war crime, crime of aggression, certainly. You could call it that, but okay, let's go with interesting. I mean, after all, Ian, it's not people you care about killing each other.
West African defense chiefs have drawn up a plan for potential military intervention if Niger's coup is not overturned by the weekend. Okay. What does this mean? I don't even know what's going on over there.
Yeah, that's exactly why you shouldn't be streaming this.
Okay, hold on. ECOWAS map. So...
Yeah, like he doesn't even know what ECOWAS is.
Niger, which is a very populous country in West Africa, recently had a little oopsie doodle. They had a little bit of a coup. And ECOWAS, which is an economic collaboration between a number of West African states.
Very crucially, yeah, he sucks. Crucially, all of them fairly subservient to Western interests.
Is a bit upsetty spaghetti over this, largely because ECOWAS is trying to build a sort of trade bloc that deals with the world and often the West, whereas right now Niger is controlled by a military coup that is looking to do more like a pan-Arabist, economic protectionist, deal with Russia, not the West kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, crucially, they've canceled the contracts with France. I mean, France is totally dependent on exploiting African mine workers and African uranium resources for their electricity. And they get it for an absolute song. In fact, countries that had previously been occupied by France in Africa are paying France for the privilege of having been occupied by France. You know, France has huge gold reserves. They have zero domestic sources of gold. Their gold is basically, it's just taken from Africa.
Stuff, you know? Here we go. Wow, that's a lot of pixels. So, ECOWAS, which is represented by all of these...
Where did he get this from? This is like the, like 8-bit meme map of West Africa.
Countries, except for Niger, Burkina Faso, and Mali, because Burkina Faso and Mali have also broken trend, are potentially going to invade, which would be wacky, which would be interesting. A lot of wacky stuff potentially happening here. Cool.
Well, yeah, I mean, isn't it just wonderful? I mean, it's going to be people Ian doesn't care about dying over France's control of African resources. I mean, this is great for him because he's made it very clear. Vosh does not care about black people.
Less horrible to look at. Are these Arab countries? These are West African countries. The junta leaders just met with Wagner and Mali. Oh yeah, worth noting, by the way, that the Wagner group is heavily behind Niger. Fucking Blue Angels.
How the fuck would you know? And also, like, okay, this is from CNN. And the question is, okay, so in their headline, They say it is a Wagner-allied junta in Mali. But what the fuck does that actually mean? Like, what does it mean that they are Wagner-allied? And what is the evidence? That is mostly just a way of saying that they are not on page with just sucking up to France anymore and allowing France to invade them. Yeah.
Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso.
And it probably, I mean, it wouldn't exactly be shocking if it turned out that all this cancellation of contracts ends up being just a renegotiation of contracts. That would not be unusual. We'll see. And, you know, there's some people who are, like, treating this as, like, the next fucking Thomas Sankara. And there's no reason yet, or Sankara, sorry. And there's absolutely no reason to assume that yet.
And Guinea? They're still going? They're going to be here for the weekend. Yeah, there we go. Mali, Burkina Faso, and Guinea will probably intervene in favor of Niger. ECOWAS would not. Who are the lesser evil?
Okay, here we go.
Honestly, for the people of West Africa,
How the fuck do you know what the people of West Africa are going to benefit from, first of all?
ECOWAS is probably a better road forward.
Because he's given this so much thought.
Than the road Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso are going. They're fucked either way. Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso currently represent, like...
It's Faso.
Being cucked out to the Wagner group. Interminable dictatorship.
Well, yeah, except that, I mean, what, you think that they're all just wonderful, like, exemplary fucking democratic regimes in West Africa right now? You think the places that are controlled by the U.S. and France and actually have U.S. bases all over them? Because the U.S. has way up Africa's ass. I mean, just look up AFRICOM. You'll see how many fucking bases there are, how much the U.S. is actually... Yeah, they're doing what's called military-to-military relations, where the idea is, fuck the government, the military is who actually has power, and we want to make sure that the military is on side with us, regardless of who gets elected, so that they will shoot their own people, rather than, say, assisting an elected government, if a democratically elected government were ever to say, we don't want U.S. bases on our fucking territory. I mean, so, like, because, see, I mean, if there's ECOWAS, you know, I mean, he's just talking about this, like fucking Cote d'Ivoire, Ghana, Benin, Togo, Sierra Leone are all in just such wonderful shape. You know, just no problems at all. No, I mean, it isn't like they are basically generating all of the resources that make the imperial core capable of functioning at all, and their working class is getting, you know, less than $1 a day to do all of this. Well, they have regimes that, you know, will shoot you if you try to join a union.
And collaboration with Russia. And Russia is like a broke, despotic country that can't provide much in the way of protection or economic support.
Well, you mean as opposed to the U.S., who refuse to provide any meaningful protection, or, like, protection for what, by the way? I mean, who's providing? Because, I mean, it seems like maybe they need protection from the U.S. and France. So maybe ECOWAS, who basically will do whatever the U.S. and France tell them, maybe they aren't actually going to be providing any protection at all either, because it's all about just extraction, you know, it's just pure extractivism.
ECOWAS isn't exactly a thriving liberal democracy, but the path they're on probably has more potential. But it's...
More potential for what, Ian?
Not, like, good?
Well, you know, what I'm getting from this, Ian, just from the way that you just seem like you're getting up to speed on this in real time in front of me, is that maybe you should shut the fuck up about this and not just go around having opinions that just happen to just coincide with U.S. imperialist interests. Isn't that... I mean, it's so funny how his opinions on matters outside of the U.S. so often align so perfectly with the interests of U.S. imperialism. Maybe you should shut the fuck up and just, like, stream some League of Legends or something.
At all? Yeah, to be clear, I'm not making the argument that...
Yeah, the potential to become the African NATO, that's... Yeah, well, I mean... Yeah, nobody... if you look at there are polls that are done, of people in the whole world's opinions of, like, other countries. And things like, which country do you think is the greatest threat to international peace and security, and things like that. And overwhelmingly, overwhelmingly outside of the imperial core, and outside of places where there are, like, active conflicts with neighboring states, the U.S. is far and away the leading answer to that question. And the opinion of the U.S. gets lower in the regions where the U.S. intervenes the most.
That ECOWAS is good, which is the one that had the Kill Whitey's concert. That is South Africa, not a part of this.
And it wasn't a Kill Whitey's fucking kill. Okay, this is a song from the anti-apartheid struggle. Dubul Ibhunu. I mean, yeah, guess what? I mean, in Ireland, they sing IRA songs all the fucking time. And nobody said, well, like, I mean, the Free State bourgeoisie and, like, unionists lose their shit. But everybody knows why people sing the songs of a fucking liberation struggle. And it's because, actually, people support that struggle.
Yeah, you're either by the West or by Russia and the Wagner Group. Nigeria, the biggest member, is a liberal democracy. Well,
no, yeah, right. They've had like 5 military coups in the past 20 years.
Well, not quite as liberal or democracy as I would like, but yes.
Because what you would like is what matters, Ian.
Nigeria is a very large and powerful country in Africa. I mean, relative to Africa, not us. Do you think Chinese loans are better for African countries? Like, okay, the Chinese Belt...
Oh, this will be interesting.
Road Initiative, their investment is neocolonialism, but it's not like we do better, right?
In fact, the U.S. does worse. In fact, I mean, it is neocolonialism. It is all about getting access to Africa's fucking natural resources. But the thing is that the imperialist competition that exists means that China, in order to get a foot in the door, has to offer more favorable terms. So they offer lower interest. They offer, like, less usurious repayment terms and things like that. And they combine it with all sorts of, like, public service and infrastructure projects and things like that. I mean, one African president, I forget who it was, said, let me see if I can find who. Just checking this. Okay, Lubinda Habazoka. Oh, no, wait. No, this is just somebody on Facebook who quotes it. A Kenyan official put it, God, I'm having trouble finding an actual attribution for this. But apparently a Kenyan official is said to have said, every time China visits, we get a hospital. Every time Britain visits, we get a lecture. I mean, and that's about it.
Right? France has been... these countries.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, the thing is, whiteness is itself is an artifact of white supremacy. The entire idea of white exists only to make white supremacy happen. It's not, there's no, like, ethnicity that is called white. There's no culture that's called white. There's no language that's called white. White is a moving target because it is a totally opportunistic idea that is about maintaining a racial hierarchy. Oh, well, I mean, that's the thing. The U.S. is not actually that much better. I mean, the difference is, I mean, the U.S. has tons of, like, white grievance politics as well. Yeah. And it isn't every time America or France visit, we get a military base. Yeah, and it's not our military base, it's theirs.
For decades and decades. Like, I'm not going to pretend we're better, you know?
I mean, you literally are worse, is the thing. I mean, mathematically, the U.S. is worse. The loans are on much worse terms. Like, China's loans do not tend to have the same kind of so-called structural adjustment provisions that the U.S. attaches, where you have to privatize all your public services and hand over all your natural resources on a silver platter and all that bullshit. Um, and you get like public infrastructure programs, and yes, of course, that infrastructure is also about helping China extract natural resources from your country, but the infrastructure is still there. And I mean, if you spend any time at all just looking at, looking at infrastructure in Africa, they need fucking infrastructure. They don't need motherfuckers coming in saying, here's a $5 billion loan in exchange for just letting us harvest all of your kidneys, as the U.S. does. The World Bank are just awful. Yeah, I mean, in the U.S., Jews only very recently got to join whiteness. I mean, well, there was like this very brief period at the beginning of the regime, like 200 years ago, where because the Jews who were actually in the country was like only a handful, and they tended to be upper class, and they tended to be very much in favor of white supremacy and stuff, and so they were white enough. But then, the 19th century, you get all these Jewish refugees from Eastern Europe and Southern Europe and places like that, and they definitely were not white. Which is why, if you look at, like, racially restrictive covenants on land, like, that say that the same covenants that are on, like, land deeds from the early 20th century saying you can't sell this to black people, also had stuff about you can't sell this to people of Hebrew race, religion, or ancestry, or shit like that. And then, I mean, it's like the late 60s that they finally, yeah, there's all sorts of wonderful shit around us. And then it's the late 60s that, at the same time, that Jews start to be declared white enough again, mostly because white people were trying to create a bulwark against the civil rights movement, and plus, suddenly Zionism became useful to U.S. imperialism. Yeah, I mean, honestly, let me just say, if Xander Hole does have a go at you, link me to that shit, and we will look at it on stream, and I will roast his ass.
I'm primarily
Did you see, like, the best performing video I've done in months on my channel was a highlight of me roasting Xander Hole for not knowing what cornbread tube is about.
concerned with what's best for the people of West Africa. And for West Africa, I think that it is marginally better to support ECOWAS.
Why? Like, what? I mean, I asked this knowing that he didn't know what ECOWAS was until like 2 days ago. Like, what exactly is better about accepting U.S. like neoliberal destruction as opposed to the possibility of some kind of non-alignment? Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, that's a very good point Hiroko makes. Yeah, I mean, and of course, the thing about the infrastructure, like with France's infrastructure and like British infrastructure, often that was actually much less useful to the indigenous population than the sort of infrastructure China's putting in. But, I mean, it is all neocolonialism. It is all fundamentally about getting their hooks into African resources, and they have to be a little bit nicer than the U.S. because they have to, I mean, because they're competing with the US. It's sort of like the US had to be okay with some social democracy and stuff in Western Europe because they needed to look better than the Soviet Union so that people would consider the US an acceptable sort of model for development. You know, if
Than the coup in Niger. But like that's not a clean cut. You know what I mean? This
yeah, especially it's not clean cut when you don't know shit about anything.
isn't exactly like a picture perfect representation of good Western intervention. This isn't like the Marshall Plan or whatever.
That's an interesting thing to bring up because if you look at the Marshall Plan, the money that went into the Marshall Plan, almost dollar for dollar, matched the expenditures of Western European countries on the expeditionary forces they sent to Africa and Asia to regain control over their colonies after World War II. Yeah, Wittheit is fucking bullshit. This racist is a bullshit.
Not, it's not good. ECOWAS.
Und die Auen.
The elements of a possible intervention have been developed, including the necessary resources, but also the way and when we will deploy the force. Commissioner Abdel Fattah. Man, that does sound like they're going to intervene. I wonder. This is what multipolarity actually means in practice? Yes, it is!
Well, I know, I mean, yeah, in a sense, that's true. That the US, as they're simply losing their undisputed primacy in the world, are going to do whatever they can to reassert it. Yeah, I mean... But what's the point here? That things were okay before, but multipolarity is somehow meaning that now there's going to be fucking bloodshed? It's like there's already fucking bloodshed.
Multipolarity causes lots of conflict, strife, and destabilization all around the world. At least this kind of multipolarity does.
Well, what is destabilization, though? Like, what is stability? Like, I mean, Noam Chomsky does a really good job of breaking down how the term stability is used in, like, the sort of ideological language that fucking Bush is using. Because stability always means obedience to the U.S. When you hear that someplace is stable in the U.S. media, it means that they do what the U.S. says. And if it's unstable, it means they don't. Or at least they can't be 100% relied upon to follow U.S. orders. And so, yeah, naturally, as the U.S. loses power over the world, which is just something that is happening, and that is really, it's just a reality that one has to adapt oneself to. I mean, people who celebrate it as just inherently an unalloyed good, well, I get a lot of side-eye from me, I have to say. But the idea that, I mean, unipolar U.S. domination of the world is somehow better is a bit questionable.
ECOWAS has won all 7 interventions since the 90s. Oh man, hold on. Niger military size. Niger armed forces, active personnel 25,000, with over 1 million people fit for military service if they were conscripted.
Well, not to mention, I mean, the thing is that if you're, well, I mean, this depends, and this is something I don't really, this is something I don't know, and unlike fucking Ian, when I don't know something, I'm gonna say it. I don't really know what the popular feeling in Niger is. Out of places in Africa that I have any kind of focus on, Niger isn't one of them, really. Like, I have a little bit of a window on South Africa because I have friends who are either from there or have lived there and post stuff, and I follow, you know, EFF and stuff like that, and get sort of an idea there. But Niger is not on my radar, really. But, you know, it's not just the military. If, you know, a foreign country invades, and this coup regime is more popular than what came before it, which is entirely possible, then it's the entire fucking population, potentially. that might be resisting the fucking invasion. Well, they don't want to say I don't know because that would suggest that people should go someplace else. Like, I mean, this is one thing I really respect about Thought Slime, actually. Like, Mildred, when people really, like, I've seen streams where Mildred is asked in chat, why don't you talk more about Ukraine? And Mildred says, because I don't know shit about the place. And and if I say something, it's probably going to be wrong. And that is an entirely fucking acceptable thing. You do not have to have a take on every single fucking thing.
But Nigeria is huge.
Basically everything in Africa is big. It doesn't look like that on the Mercator projection, but the Mercator projection also makes it look like Lima and Santiago are a couple hours apart, when in fact it's like 2.5 days drive. The Mercator projection is bullshitting us.
Nigerian army is 160,000 strong. So 6 times the size of Niger's army, just based on their standing.
Yeah, but the thing is, what he's not taking into account is the fucking political dimension of all this. Because does the army of Nigeria really want to go into somebody else's country and, murder their people in the hopes of installing a government that maybe the people in the Nigerian army wouldn't mind having back home? I mean, it isn't just, you can't just look at this and say it's just straight up numbers. It isn't that simple, and I don't have the answers here. I don't know the polling for Niger or Nigeria. What I do know is that when you're invading somebody for like an explicit regime change operation like this would be, that where it's literally just an act of aggression, you aren't necessarily going to count on the greatest enthusiasm from your troops, and you might, in fact, depending on how popular the replacement, the coup regime is, you might very well end up fighting against an entire civilian population who'd rather to have the people who are in charge now than the pricks who came before them. Speaking of, okay, we're sort of running short on time at this point, and I just want to say, since we're talking about curiosity and not knowing and stuff like that, I have begun work on a video I have wanted to do for a very long time. First of all, let me just say, there is a new video up from me, a new short video essay, and let me just give you a link to that. It is about this whole bullshit in women's chess. And the just vile rule that FIDE has enacted. So just if you haven't seen that, check that out. I think it's quite good. But so I have wanted for a long time to do a video on analyzing sources and media literacy and basically understanding propaganda and how to deal with a propaganda-rich environment. And I have begun working on that, and it deals with exactly the sort of things we're talking about right now. And it's probably going to be on the long side. It's going to be, I mean, it's been very long in the making, really, in a way it's been decades in the making, but I've been trying to get myself to do it for years now. So that is on the horizon. And I'll probably put it up on my Patreon for, like, early access for patrons. But, I mean, it's still a ways off. I've just begun writing the script and doing, like, the animations and shit for it.
They're standing forces. Scripting them in a week is not possible. No, it's not. Yeah, Nigeria would win. So,
how the fuck do you know? Now he's a fucking expert on military strategy.
So what is... so I'm guessing that the coup in Niger, like, they're just betting that ECOWAS doesn't do anything.
Well, see, maybe they're betting that ECOWAS does something, but people are actually more interested in supporting a coup regime that says fuck you to the colonial masters who've been ruining their lives for all this time than for a bunch of people who want to put those colonial masters back in the saddle.
It's not like Mali and Burkina Faso have the troops to do anything about an invasion from Nigeria. Like, how many Wagner personnel are in Burkina Faso and Mali? It can't be more than 10,000.
Because, of course, why would anyone even give any thought to what the actual African people living in these countries might think and might do about a foreign invasion? Why would anyone give any thought to that? Like, I mean, Ian Kuczynski doesn't care about black people.
Probably quite a bit less. Around 5,000. 5,000 Wagner troops is nothing to scoff at when it comes to, like, African military engagement compared to what Nigeria...
What the fuck do you know about African military engagement?
Nigeria can field? Would Nigeria be willing to field its, like, entire military? Or, like, a reasonable portion of it? Would be willing to commit to a...
Like, and these are all questions you don't know the answer to and have absolutely... Oh, I forgot he does have an undergraduate Soc degree. I mean, and he has the monotone voice. That is why he knows everything. He has the voice to bore them all.
Conflict of this. Probably. It's not as though Nigeria wants to have, like, a military dictatorship do a coup right north of them.
Well, I mean, considering how many military dictatorships have done coups in fucking Nigeria, it's not like it's a completely alien notion to them.
Make them look very good. The last ECOWAS military invention, and the Gambia? Yeah, but the Gambia is nowhere near...
Operation Restore Democracy. Okay. It's an ongoing... Okay, so the Gambia is actually under occupation by ECOWAS already. So... I mean, so it isn't just a matter of, how many troops, Nigeria or whoever can spare to invade Niger. It's also how many troops they have to keep in the Gambia in order to maintain control of the Gambia.
As large as Niger. What were the casualties here? Were there any? Basically none.
Some people remain displaced after 26,000 to 45,000 people fled during the 2016-2017 Gambian constitutional crisis. Yeah, that's basically none. Yeah, yeah, that is true, Hiroko. Of course, the thing is, from the perspective of people in these countries, it's not having independence versus having China take over your infrastructure. It's more having the US up your ass all the time, or having China up your ass. They're not really seeing an option of having nobody up their asses. I mean, that would be communism. But with that, it is time to say good night. Thank you to everyone who has joined. It's been a very nice, lively discussion in chat. And we've got to watch Ian Kuczynski talk about how he doesn't know shit about Africa, but will crap on about it like as he's some kind of fucking expert. Anyway, I will be back tomorrow at 11:30 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time, and I look forward to seeing you then.